Have you ever wished you could see into the future? Just a little peek to know what's coming? Well, you're not alone. For thousands of years, our ancestors were just as obsessed with the future as we are today. But without supercomputers or fancy algorithms, how did they do it? Let's journey back in time and uncover the fascinating, and sometimes bizarre, ways ancient civilizations tried to predict what was next. From the grand temples of Egypt to the misty mountains of China, almost every ancient culture had its own unique methods for fortune-telling. This wasn't just a party trick, it was serious business. Kings and emperors would bet the fate of their entire empires on these predictions. So, what were their secrets? Let's start with one of the most famous, the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece. Imagine climbing a sacred mountain to a temple shrouded in mystery. There, a priestess known as the Pythia would fall into a trance, supposedly channeling the god Apollo himself. She'd babble cryptic phrases, which priests would then interpret for anxious visitors. These visitors ranged from simple farmers asking about their crops to powerful rulers asking whether to go to war. The predictions were famously ambiguous. When King Croesus of Lydia asked if he should attack Persia, the oracle said, "If you cross the river, a great empire will be destroyed." He crossed, attacked, and a great empire was indeed destroyed, his own. A classic case of read the fine print. Over in ancient Rome, they weren't talking to gods in a trance, they were talking to birds. Seriously. This practice was called augury, and the augurs were highly respected officials. They would observe the flight patterns of birds, the sounds they made, and even their eating habits. A flock of birds flying to the right. Good omen. To the left, bad sign. They also practiced something called haruspicy, which involved inspecting the livers of sacrificed animals. A healthy, well-formed liver meant the gods were pleased. Any blemishes or deformities were a sign of impending disaster. It might sound gruesome to us, but for the Romans, it was a direct line to divine will. Now, let's head east to ancient China, where one of the oldest forms of divination began. Have you ever heard of oracle bones? During the Shang dynasty, over 3,000 years ago, kings would ask questions to their ancestors and deities. These questions were carved onto turtle shells or animal bones. A hot poker was then applied to the bone, causing it to crack. The diviners, who were sort of like the data analysts of their day, would interpret the patterns of these cracks to get an answer. Will the harvest be good? Crack. Should we go to battle? Crack. These bones are incredible because they're not just tools of divination, they're also the earliest examples of Chinese writing we have, giving us a direct window into the minds of ancient rulers. Of course, we can't talk about predicting the future without looking up at the stars. Astrology is perhaps the most enduring form of ancient divination. The Babylonians, living in modern-day Iraq, were master astronomers. They meticulously tracked the movements of the sun, moon, and planets, believing that these celestial bodies influenced life on Earth. They created the zodiac and were the first to associate specific personality traits and destinies. With the position of the stars at the time of a person's birth, this system was so influential that it spread to Greece, Rome, Egypt, and beyond, and it's a system millions of people still follow today when they check their daily horoscope. The ancient Egyptians also had a deep connection with the cosmos. For them, the most important celestial event was the annual flooding of the Nile River, which was the lifeblood of their civilization. They noticed that this flood coincided with the heliacal rising of the star Sirius. This allowed them to predict the flood and create a remarkably accurate 365-day calendar. So, in a way, their entire society was built around a cosmic prediction. They also practiced various forms of dream interpretation, believing that dreams were messages from the gods, offering warnings or guidance for the future. And what about the Maya in Central America? They were obsessed with time. They developed some of the most complex and sophisticated calendar systems ever created. They didn't just have one calendar, they had multiple calendars running at the same time, tracking long cycles of time spanning thousands of years. Their priests used these calendars to predict auspicious dates for battles, coronations, and religious ceremonies. Their famous long count calendar led to a lot of hype and misunderstanding back in 2012, with many people believing it predicted the end of the world. But for the Maya, it was simply the end of one great cycle and the beginning of another, much like our calendar rolls over from December 31st to January 1st. So, did any of these methods actually work? Well, from a modern scientific perspective, probably not in the way they believe. The patterns in a sheep's liver or the flight of a bird likely don't hold the secrets to the stock market or your love life. But that's not the point. What's truly fascinating is what these practices tell us about the human condition. They show a deep-seated need to find meaning, order, and control in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable. These ancient diviners were the original psychologists, counselors, and risk managers. Their predictions, whether from the stars or from bones, gave people a sense of security and a framework for making decisions. A prophecy might give a king the confidence to lead his army into a risky battle or give a farmer hope during a long drought. The ambiguity of many prophecies, like the one given to King Croesus, was also a feature, not a bug. It made them almost impossible to prove wrong, ensuring the diviners kept their jobs. Today, we have weather forecasts, economic models, and medical diagnostics. We use data, probability, and science to try and chart the future. But are we really so different? We still look for patterns, we still want reassurance, and we still hope to make the best possible choices for our future. The tools have changed, but the fundamental human desire to know what's around the corner remains exactly the same. The legacy of these ancient seers lives on, not in their magical powers, but in our own relentless quest to understand tomorrow. Thanks for joining me on this journey through time. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. See you in the next one.